Our third big topic today is pretty interesting commentary around a possible AI powered paradigm shift that some people are starting to see in the SaaS space, software as a service space. And this is getting a fair amount of attention online. So we wanted to kind of unpack it. This concept is called service as software. And it's outlined in an essay from Foundation Capital, which is a VC firm that's invested in some notable companies like Netflix and some AI firms like Jasper. Now, foundational capital defines this idea of service as software as this paradigm shift that basically entails the fact that AI is causing a transition from software as a service to service as software. And what this means is, in the past, you bought access to a software tool or a platform. This is how SaaS works today, how it worked before. You use this software to achieve your desired outcomes in your work. However, they argue that AI is changing this because it's not just giving you access to tools that make you more productive. It is giving you access to bots that essentially act as brains. In other words, when you buy an AI tool, you're buying access to technology that can increasingly perform some of the work, the tasks, the services for you, instead of giving you the ability to do the service better, faster, cheaper on your own. So, like, as an example, instead of buying QuickBooks in order to make your finance team or an outside firm better at maintaining your books, you may in the future simply be buying access to an AI accountant that does the job of that finance professional or does the job of the outside firm. And this is a change that just has massive implications for both jobs and SaaS companies, according to Foundation Capital. So if you think of something like the basic value proposition of software like Salesforce, a human rep enters the data, Salesforce helps them do their job much more productively. But suddenly with AI, and especially with AI agents, you unlock capabilities and autonomous actions that far more resemble a skilled human performing a service, not just some piece of software that a person uses. So the whole point here, they argue, is that the size of the opportunity for AI disruption of services, of jobs, of roles, of tasks is far bigger than the opportunity that exists to disrupt existing SaaS tools. And so they ask, how much work will AI plus automation and the service as software model do away with? We believe this is a $4.6 trillion question. This is a number they get to by looking at salaries of jobs globally and the amount spent on outsourced services and salaries. So, Paul, there's a lot to unpack behind this concept, but I kind of wanted to just start by talking about this thesis seems directionally correct to me based on kind of what we know and teach. Like in my mind, we have to acknowledge we're no longer just building static tools that make employees more productive. That's part of what's being built in the world of AI. But we're also building technology that fundamentally alters how work is done and determines which work gets done by a human. Does that map at all to kind of how you're thinking about this?
Yeah, and I think it's a really delicate dance for these software companies. So I had to laugh. Like the first time I saw this service as software quote, I was like, is that meaning the software companies building AI are having to sell services
Yeah,
because they're not making enough money? That was what I assumed
I
it
thought that
was.
too. Yeah.
And then I saw like Brian Halligan tweeted it, and I was like, oh, Halligan wouldn't be tweeting that if that's what that meant. And so I like started digging in a little bit more. Um, so yeah, I think like the delicate dance I'm referring to is again, if you listen to the show regularly, you've heard me say like my agency PR 2020 that I sold in 2020 was HubSpot's first partner back in 2007. So we built our entire agency around being a value added reseller and partner of HubSpot's. And so HubSpot customers that didn't want to do the work would come to my firm and we would build plans, we would create content. That's where Mike and I worked together at PR 2020. Um, and so that was what we did. We added value to HubSpot software by providing services to their customers who did not have the internal capabilities to do these things. And so now we're entering into this phase where whether it's QuickBooks or Salesforce or HubSpot or take your pick of SaaS tool, Um, the SaaS companies themselves can be thinking of their software as part of the org chart, in essence, as outside providers. They're not just selling the software, the tools to do the job. They're selling you an agent that can do the job, so you don't need an outside agency in potentially. So this certainly aligns with what we talked about last week on episode 92, with Google positioning their AI agents as customer agents, employee agents, creative agents, data agents, code agents, security agents. They're positioning these AI tools that can do things, that can take actions, in essence, as people.
Mm.
They're able to do a bundle of tasks, which a job is basically just a bundle of tasks. I found myself this weekend revisiting the GPTs are GPTs paper from OpenAI, which they released when GPT-4 came out in 2023. And that's the basic premise, is that these things are general purpose technologies that are capable of evolving. They're capable of being built on top of, and they're able to do things that humans would do. So I think this is the thing that people just aren't talking enough about. That as we follow these scaling laws that we touched on earlier, that Zuckerberg believes in, and Altman believes in, and Anthropic believes in, like they all are believing in these scaling laws.
Mm.
And if these laws hold, we will, in the not too distant future, have relatively reliable agents that can function doing many of the tasks that would make up a job. And again, I've said this before, like, I just don't hear from large enterprises who are addressing this, who are actually thinking about what this means,
Mm.
um, and preparing for it. And for agencies, like we talked a couple episodes ago about how much Accenture's making, like it was 640 million or whatever in a quarter,
Mm.
just doing AI consulting work. You do have to look out to the future and say, well, that could keep scaling. They could be a 10, billion or whatever. Or 2 years from now, the agents are just going to do most of the stuff that they're making consulting money on. I don't know. Like, I don't know where it goes, but this is definitely, as you said, kind of directionally what we're seeing is it's going to be very narrow to start. You're not going to have this general agent that I just go and get one agent from HubSpot or Salesforce or Adobe or whatever, and it just
Mm.
does the job of all of my people. But you're going to have these tasks, and maybe they're like think of it as like AI roles, like customer service, BDR, marketer, podcast producer, social media manager, whatever it is, that you're training these agents to be very specifically fine tuned to do a bundle of 10 or 15 or 20 tasks. And now all of a sudden, it becomes very disruptive to jobs. Right now, we have distinct tasks that are able to be automated. In the not too distant future, we will have bundles of tasks, and that's what a job is.
Yep. Yeah, I think also what jumped out at me is in this post with from Foundation Capital, they're kind of trying to quantify, right, with this $4.6 trillion question. They're trying to quantify what is the size of the opportunity in terms of salaries being paid for different roles. And we talk about quite often, we've talked about since way back when we started reading the quants. It's like, what
Yeah.
is the opportunity to disrupt things? I think the equation is something to the effect of the technology being able to do it plus the size of the opportunity. So when I look at a chart like this, I see a ton of very hungry AI startups that are going to start coming for salaried work, perhaps. I mean, I don't think it'll be that, like you said, all at once, but the incentives here give me some pause to think about.
Yeah, and I think like the Quants was one book that you and I both read in the early days, and the other one that really started my path down AI was Automate This by Christopher Steiner. And I think
Yes.
that's where we
Yes.
originally saw that quote was like the potential to disrupt plus the reward for disruption. And that was
Yes.
actually the quote that led me to say, well, hold on a second. This is 2012. AI is gonna come for marketing and sales and service. It's not here yet, but like the potential to disrupt is massive. And what you're saying is the potential to disrupt the service industry is way greater than even the software industry. And so it would make a ton of sense that that's where these research labs and tech companies would be focusing on, is like, hey, if we can, coding's great. Like writing
Mm.
code is really helpful. But if we can actually augment or replace work, now they're not going to call it that. No one is going to say our job is to replace workers. Like it's not going to be anybody's tagline, but that is what they are all thinking. Like,
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how many times a month I hear this when I'm meeting with companies or talking to people at companies, the thing no one's saying, but the thing we're being directed to is, do we need as many humans in the future? It's not going to be in earnings calls. Like, they're not going to talk about this, but it is the thing they are all talking about, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yep. That's exactly what I'm getting at. I think that's wise for people to keep in mind as we move forward and see what happens here.